So I'd like to call this meeting of the a regular board meeting of July 18th, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Just some housekeeping for those members of the public that are joining us virtually. If you could keep your microphone on mute until you're ready to speak. If you'd like to speak, that would be wonderful. And for those of us in the boardroom today, if you could silence your mobile devices through the course of the meeting. I will be calling on directors in roll call order for discussion and questions in the following order: Director Grasha, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, and Vice President Bowman, who is on vacation this week, and then me, President Ortega. And all votes will also be conducted via roll call order. And with that, I was going to ask Director Bloomer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So item number 2 on our agenda is a roll call, and I'd like Assistant Secretary Baca to conduct that, please.
Director Grasha,
Present.
Director Bloomer,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Present.
and President Ortega.
Present. Thank you. Item number 3, public comment on items that are not listed on our agenda today. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to participate in our meeting by directing questions or making statements regarding business of the water agency, but not necessarily on today's agenda. If there are members of the audience who would like to do so, please let us know, either by raising your hand virtually or otherwise coming to the podium. We're asking that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And do we have anybody attending virtually who would like to participate in public comment for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll move to item number 4, which is public comment on items that are listed on our agenda. And again, we'd like to keep those comments to no more than 3 minutes. And Assistant Secretary Baca, did we receive any comments via email or otherwise?
No comments have been received.
Thank you. So seeing no request for participation in public comments, we can move to item number 5, which is the consent calendar items. So these are items that are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion of the board without discussion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member requests a specific item to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any directors that would like to have a discussion on any of these items listed under 5? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented.
Move to accept the consent calendar as presented.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Grasha. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Great. Second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Item number 6 are action items. We have 3 listed today. And we will start with a request for adoption of revenue stabilization rate policy. Finance Director Sines, please.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. In 2022, the agency contracted with a water rate consulting firm, NBS, to conduct a review of the agency's water rates. In their final cost of service study dated in May 2023, NBS proposed and recommended the agency approve a revenue stabilization rate in addition to the agency's already established drought rate. This rate is intended to mitigate revenue shortages that may arise due to fluctuations in water demand resulting from circumstances other than drought or other mandated conservation measures, which could threaten the agency's ability to continue to provide clean, safe, and reliable water to its customers. On June 28, 2023, the Board of Directors adopted the revenue stabilization rate. And this policy is proposed to manage how we implement and rescind that rate. Within the policy, I have some highlights here listed for you. The projected water sales will be developed in conjunction with the annual budget and presented to the Finance Committee, which will provide the baseline against which the fiscal year-to-date water sales will be compared. Currently, this projection is already done and presented to the Finance Committee, so it is not a new process that we'll be doing. It's just the current one that we already do that we will be utilizing for comparison. If water sales are more than 10% below expected year-to-date levels, the general manager will notify the board at a public meeting, and the board may take the following actions. The board can direct the general manager to implement all or part of any proposed expense reduction measures and/or direct the general manager to utilize reserves to meet all or part of the revenue gap and/or approve a revenue stabilization rate at a level that does not exceed the cumulative year-to-date volumetric water sales deficit of 10, 15, 20, 25, or 30%. And I would like to note that it is not just one of these decisions the board can make. These are all of the actions that can be taken either individually or all together in some combination. If a revenue stabilization rate is implemented, customers will be provided with a 30-day notice prior to that rate taking effect. The board may rescind the revenue stabilization rate at any point in time. When water sales have returned to expected fiscal year-to-date levels, the general manager will notify the board and the revenue stabilization rate will automatically be rescinded. The Executive Committee has reviewed this draft revenue stabilization rate policy, and this policy is substantially the same as the next policy that we will be presenting to you, which is the proposed drought rate policy, with minor differences regarding how the rates will be implemented. Legal counsel has reviewed the attached revenue stabilization rate policy, and for the fiscal impact currently, there is no fiscal impact regarding the adoption if the board chooses to adopt it. The revenue stabilization rate is implemented by the board. If it's implemented by the board according to this policy, it will allow the agency to mitigate future fiscal impacts due to revenue shortages that may arise due to fluctuations in water demand resulting from circumstances other than drought or other mandated conservation measures. Staff recommends the board adopt the revenue stabilization rate policy to govern how the agency's revenue stabilization rate will be implemented and rescinded. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding the policy.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have a question or a comment?
No questions or comments, thank you.
Okay. Director Bloomer,
No questions or comments.
thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I have none, thanks.
Okay. And I don't have any either, so I think we can go ahead and we'll look for a motion to accept the policy as presented.
Go ahead.
I'll move that.
Okay, I have a first from Secretary Treasurer McKenna. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Bloomer. So may we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Our next item, 6B, request adoption of drought rate policy. Again, Finance Director signs.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. In 2016, the agency contracted with the same consultant that we did our last rate study with, NBS, to conduct a review of the agency's water rates. At that time, the final cost of service study dated October 2016, NBS proposed and recommended the agency approve drought rates. These rates are intended to mitigate revenue shortages that may arise due to drought or other unexpected mandatory water conservation events, which could threaten the agency's ability to provide clean, safe, and reliable drinking water to its customers. On December 15, 2016, the Board of Directors adopted those proposed drought rates. In 2023, the agency, again, contracted with NBS to perform the comprehensive rate study. And as a part of that rate study, the drought rates were updated and aligned with the agency's water shortage contingency plan that was adopted in June 2021. To date, drought rates have never been implemented by the Board of Directors. The Executive Committee requested staff develop a drought rate policy after the review of the then proposed revenue stabilization rate policy. The drought rate policy is substantially the same as the revenue stabilization rate policy, with minor differences regarding how the rates are implemented. Some of the highlights include that the policy aligns with the agency's water shortage contingency plan that was adopted in 2021. Projected water sales will be developed in conjunction with the annual budget and presented to the Finance Committee, which will serve as a baseline against which the current annual sales to date will be compared. If the board has declared a mandatory conservation level in accordance with the agency's water shortage contingency plan and revenues are more than 10% below expected revenues, the general manager will notify the board at a public meeting, and the board may take one or all or a combination of the following actions. Direct the general manager to implement all or part of any proposed expense reduction measures. Direct the general manager to utilize reserves to meet all or part of the revenue gap, and or approve a drought rate at a level that does not exceed the drought rate that corresponds with the shortage level in effect. If a drought rate is implemented, customers will be provided a 30-day notice prior to the rate taking effect. While a drought rate is in effect, the board will review the drought rate at least once every 6 months to determine if it is still necessary. The board may rescind the drought rate at any point in time. When water sales have returned to an expected fiscal year-to-date levels, the general manager will notify the board and a drought rate will automatically be rescinded. Legal counsel has reviewed the attached draft drought rate policy. And for the fiscal impact, there's currently no fiscal impact at this time. If a drought rate is implemented by the board according to this policy, it will allow the agency to mitigate future fiscal impacts due to drought or other conditions mandating water conservation. Staff recommends the board adopt the drought rate policy to govern how the agency's drought rate will be implemented, monitored, and rescinded. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the policy.
Thank you. So, Director Grasha, do you have any questions about this?
I have no questions and no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No questions or comments.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Just a clarification, these two policies is an either or, is that correct?
That is correct. The way that the policies are written is that it is either the drought policy or it is either the drought rate that's implemented or the revenue stabilization rate that is implemented. They do not stack on top of each other.
All right, thanks.
And I have no questions or comments, so I'll look for a motion, please.
Move the recommended action.
Thank you. From Director Grasha, the first.
I'll second.
Thank you. Director Bloomer. So may we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Our final action item today is 6C, request board authorization for general manager to execute agreement with A&N Technical Services, Inc. And I think that's Ms. Weinrich.
Yes. So in the past year, we applied for a Prop 1 Round 2 grant to do turf removal, but also a regional conservation study to look at our programs and see, are they effective? Do we have the right amount? Are the water savings we thought actually showing up and being realistic? And we're working with the it's going to be all 5 agencies within the Coachella Valley: Indio Water Authority, Coachella Water Authority, Coachella Valley Water District, Mission Springs, and us. So we are tasked to administer the program. And so what that is we are going to hire a consultant that would do this study over the next year, and we will actually kind of manage it. It just makes more sense, and it's an easy in our wheelhouse to do that for the other agencies. So we did an RFP out, and we received one application, but they have several sub-consultants on there. So we actually get the benefit of several different really high experienced consultants to work on the project. So what we're asking today is to go into an agreement with A&E, that's the A&E Technical Services, to do the work for the regional conservation study. And how the work financing is it's a $150,000 grant, and we pay, and then it gets replenished. It's kind of almost like a pass-through. We have money paid through our other programs, our federal funds. So it's only the only cost we have is going to be a whopping $440. That's because the grant doesn't cover travel. So, but we are able to fit that in our budget. So what we're asking today is just approval to go into contract, to have the general manager go into contract with A&E so that we can begin this project. And if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
Well, in reading through the proposal here, there's a piece in there where they kind of spell out one of the areas that they're planning to look at, and that is conversion back to grass. Or what are they planning to look at averages, or are they going to look historically back, or are they going to just project on that? Because in my experience, that when a property sells, it sometimes, can go back to grass.
Correct.
And I wonder, is there? It occurred to me that the city, I don't know if they have. Have they banned new grass and new developments? No. Well,
Not at this time.
anyway, that was what was about this whole thing. That was the one thing that I have a concern about. A new board comes into an HOA, they don't like rocks, and they pull out all the rocks and turn it back to grass, or what, that kind of stuff. And I know that can happen, so that's my only concern about this. I'm looking forward to what they come up with. I don't know all the different angles that they plan to look at this, but it's an interesting, it's going to be an interesting study once we get it back, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope they get it done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's going to take a year to do the full study. So by next July, we'll have a report and present to you on the findings. But that is one component they're looking at to see, okay, we do all these conversions. Is it 5% that go back, 20% to go back? They'll actually be doing spatial imagery and data mining to determine that in the different areas. But it is a regional program, so there won't be tons, maybe necessarily all in our area. It'll be spread out through all of Coachella Valley. But we tend to be the same kind of patterns within the general community, the valley community, on that type of issue.
And we'll get hard numbers on what the actual savings are in water use?
Yeah, they're going to go through as much as possible. They're going to obviously extrapolate some degree because, and take in weather, because we obviously know like this water usage went down this winter because it was fantastic and we had tons of rain. But then in hot seasons, if we had a really hot year, dry year, water went up even if they converted. So they'll be taking all those factors. The California Data Collaborative, I believe it's called, they're one of the subcontractors, and this is what they do. They have been helping a lot of water agencies prepare for new regulations that are coming, where we have to actually figure out how much water we need to sell that's efficient. Like we'll get a budget for the whole service area. And so they've been doing a lot of work on that and getting imagery and doing calculations out to find out how much water does it really save. Because water savings sometimes from a big commercial property is more than, say, you have a yard that's like 400 square feet. They tend to water more high visibility, and they have more pressure to keep it green versus a homeowner themselves. So it'll be really interesting to see those stats and these theories, are they actually true? Are we seeing it in data? So.
Well, I'm generally supportive of the program, but I'm generally skeptical about everything, so this is nothing new. So I appreciate your time and effort and looking forward to the results. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we get quarterly reports, so we can, and definitely will be in our committee meeting, the Conservation Public Affairs. We'll be giving you quarterly updates on how things are going,
All right,
some findings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer
No questions or comments, thank you.
and Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Well, first of all, I think this is great work that we can get this kind of data for $400. So congratulations on the grant funding. I'm really looking forward to reading it because we do institute these programs with a degree of hope rather than knowledge. So next year I'll be looking forward to reading it and seeing, just what sort of bang we're getting for the buck on these rebates. It'd be good to know. Thanks.
And I just wanted to make a follow-up comment regarding the conversion. Well, I think you actually had two comments, Director Gracia. One was new developments and are they allowed to use grass? Actually, the state of California has what's called the Water Efficiency Landscape Ordinance, and every municipality and county has adopted some version of that, either the state's model or they've adopted something even more restrictive. And any new project that comes to the city for development, or any city or any county, actually has to go through this review process where they're given essentially a water budget based on the landscapable area, and then they have to do calculations to show that they're going to be at or below that number. That doesn't disallow for turf altogether, but it minimizes the amount of turf that can actually be used. And as for HOAs converting from one type of landscape to another, that's actually part of the city ordinance. They do actually have to go to the city and apply for a permit to do exactly that, because the theory being that, or the idea being that an original landscape was approved when that project was developed, and so if they're going to change that, they have to go back. It's as if they were going to change the buildings themselves. They'd have to go back and ask for a review of that change in the landscape. So that is something that they sort of manage. I'm not sure how well they manage, but that's at least according to the zoning and planning code that's required.
And we've been we met with the city and the plan of kind of talking with planning to see like how we can make sure we communicate to those that apply for our program. We may not have those requirements, but the city does. So we're adding to the process. You need to contact the city to make sure you meet all those requirements. And then that at the end, they have a verification that the city approved their projects before we give them money. And I think that's good because that builds a strong relationship with the city and with us, being all on the same page in this kind of program.
Great.
So.
Thank you. So I'll look for a motion to accept action item 6C as presented.
Move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Director Gracia. I'll look for a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer McKenna. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. We can move to item number 7, which is our General Manager's Report. Mr. Kraus?
Good morning. The first item on the GM report is DWR's funding of the regional AMI program, and Desert Water Agency has been awarded $375,000 to expand our fixed network or start our fixed network. DWR is awarding $2.375 million to the regional meter replacement project under the Urban Community Drought Relief Grant Program. DWA and Indio will be receiving money for the regional projects, and as I said, we'll be receiving $375,000, and we'll be responsible for $125,000 in cost share. Indio Water Authority will take the lead as the project sponsor, and we will be using Woodard and Kern to perform some or all of the grant administration. And as I also said before, all this money will be going towards implementing our fixed network on our AMI conversion project. The next item is a whitewater hydro generation update. Since we began receiving water in April from Metropolitan on our exchange program, we've been generating power at the whitewater hydro plant in April, May, and June. We've generated 1,475 megawatts, and to date, we've had a settlement with Southern California Edison for $133,649, which we split with Coachella Valley Water District, so we'll be receiving around $67,000 of that $133,000. Next item is our July 25th special joint meeting between DWA and Mission Springs Water District. Secretary Baca has worked long and hard to get a date, and that was the date that everybody could agree upon. The meeting will start at 8 a.m. on July 25th. It will be held at the Mission Creek Recharge Facilities Staff is still working out some of the logistics and some of the presentation. That will be occurring next Tuesday. The next item is award of our wellness grant. Aqua JPIA has awarded Desert Water Agency a wellness grant in the amount of $2,000 to be spent in this fiscal year. And do we have any plans for the $2,000? I have lots of ideas. You do? Okay, usually we get some nice workout equipment or some things for, healthy snacks for the employees. So I'm anxious to see what that's going to be. Human resources meetings and activities. We had new intern orientation. We had a webinar on building bridges, authenticity at work, UCR Women in Leadership Advisory Meeting. We had CPR first aid training for all employees, so that was all last week. Eddie Gonzalez conducted our class, and 88 people went through, or
About 78 this week, and we have some more training tomorrow and following.
yeah, so a lot of training. We also had a United Way campaign celebration for DWA staff, and so that we had a record contribution from staff this year to United Way. What was the increase? 33% increase. 33%. How many thousands is that? Or? We're up to 22,000. So pretty proud of that. I also had a webinar on grappling with addiction issues in the workplace. On our system leak data, I think you're aware of the situation on Via Vaquero. We had 31 leaks on a 4-inch main. That's been dealt with. We also had some leaks on some other larger mains in Ramon Road, Racket Club Road, a 10-inch, and Palm Canyon Drive, also a 10-inch. So we had a total of 67 leaks for the period of June 27th through July 10th. If you take away the Via Vaquero leaks, you're left with about 36 leaks, so that's higher than usual. But not unusual for us when we have a change in the weather. We have increased demands, velocities and pressures change in the system to adapt to that, and it causes some leaks when we go through that transition. And then general managers, meetings and activities. First item is vacation. Thank you very much. I had a week off, and it was great. Steve Johnson attended all my meetings for me. We had our bi-monthly IT status update, the board meeting, last board meeting. Had a meeting with Vertex One, Snow Creek Security, DCP coordination meeting. Also a meeting with to discuss and implement our ESRI. Then when I got back, I had a legislative update meeting, a meeting with Metropolitan Water District to talk about delivery coordination and the type of water being delivered. We also had some correspondence with Palm Springs Life magazine. We had a call from DWR to talk about the DCP, and they're reaching out to all the state water contractors to kind of figure out what we need to communicate to the board and also to the public about the DCP. So they're trying to help us with that. I also contacted Todd Groundwater to prepare for a discussion on Chrome 6 that will be coming to the board here soon. As I mentioned, there was CPR training. We had a meeting with City of Palm Springs, kind of a meet and greet to meet the city manager, assistant city manager, and talk about what DWA does in the community, and also to talk about a recycle water project with their engineering group. We had a second meeting to talk about recycle water at the park. We had an executive committee meeting. We have had a couple meetings to plan for a joint meeting with Mission Springs Water District, meetings on properties up in the Whitewater Canyon at our diversion. We had a sites joint budget finance committee meeting. And later on today, I'll be having a meeting to learn about our statewide airborne electromagnetic survey project. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have any questions for our general manager?
Lots of things going on, and I think I'll just stand by and watch the show. Thank you very much for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
No questions or comments. Thanks.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Yeah, I have two. The joint meeting with Mission Springs, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's wonderful we're doing it. I've seen a lot of public comment that thinks we're about to solve the lawsuit right there and then. So I want to reduce expectations a little bit. You know, it's more like a first date than a marriage, right? The second one is I'm looking at the list of leaks, and I'm a little bit concerned about Ramon Road. A 12-inch main that's leaked 6 times in a couple of weeks. I drive Ramon Road all the time, and I see, you know, a recent asphalt, a long stretch of, I guess, is new pipeline a couple of years old. What section of Ramon Road is problematic right now?
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, the stretch that has the main majority of leaks is between El Cielo and Compadre.
Okay.
And there is a plan, we do have a plan where we can eliminate that stretch of main. And there's a design for that. We're going to try to work that into our upcoming replacement pipeline project. If it continues to give us leaks, we potentially could move it onto an emergency pipeline.
Yeah, so you're on top of
Delegation.
it. Yeah, let's keep an eye on that, because a big main like that on a busy street, you know, we don't want a disaster happening there.
Absolutely.
Right, anything else?
Nope.
Okay. And I have no questions or comments at this time, so we can move to item number 8, Director's Reports on Meetings and Events Attended on behalf of the agency. I'll ask if you could please, as you're making your presentation, for each director to announce the date of the meeting or event and the name of the meeting and event. So I'll start with Director Gracia.
I had a pretty active couple of weeks. Of course, our regular board meetings was on the 5th, on Wednesday, 2 weeks ago. The following day, I attended the Desert Valley Builders Association luncheon, and the speaker at that event was the planning development director for the city of Desert Hot Springs, and gave an update on accessory dwelling units and the impact that those will have in Desert Hot Springs and throughout the district and the state, I guess. An interesting presentation. Desert Hot Springs seems to be really trying to push that as a way to fix their housing issues. I did the math. I don't see that it's going to be all that helpful. I don't know how many people are going to want to build a $200,000 guest house in their backyard and give up their patio or what, you know. It just seemed, anyway. The next meeting was the Coachella Valley Water District Board meeting. Was routine in that, and really in the things that happened. But it occurred to me when I say that these meetings are routine, that there's really nothing routine about any of them. But when you've watched so many of them, participated in them, they develop a rhythm, and so I recommend anybody with an interest watch these meetings. They're your public in action, your public government in action. It's amazing to see all the different. It's a great show for the kids at home that might want to participate in their future. Also on the 12th of July, I attended the Building Industry Association had an event out at the Acrisure Arena. It was sponsored by the County of Riverside Executive Office, and we had two people participating. One was the speakers. One was the general manager of the arena out there, and then former assemblyman and I think he's retired now from the County of Riverside's executive office, Brian Estandi. And had a great opportunity to catch up with Brian. Brian came to the desert at my invitation back in 1993, I think. I had managed Sonny Bono's primary campaign and was successful. Brian came in to pick up in the general election. He had been on the Huffington Senate campaign, and of course it lost. And that's how he came, and now he's retired from the county, served, 10 years in the state assembly. And the interesting thing is that he served for 10 years as Sonny's chief of staff, or several years as Sonny's chief of staff until Sonny died, and then worked for Mary. And had a chance to talk with him briefly about my interest. Hasn't really come to the board yet, but in acquiring the land out at the recharge ponds that belong to the Bureau of Land Management. So that was an interesting interaction. And then also on the 14th, another Building Industry Association luncheon was held in Corona, and the guest speaker was Assemblyman Asali, and he's an interesting fellow. He served as in the White House counsel's office, and also as assistant U.S. attorney, I think, in Riverside County, and certainly in the DA's office under Mike Hestron. And he was elected, I guess, in November. He has a varying past that is very very active in public life, and it was an opportunity to meet with him. I was able to talk to him for about 20 minutes. It was a light attendance, so there was it was very beneficial trip out to Corona and back. Building Industry Association is celebrating their 100th anniversary in November. And it turns out we're not members, so you'll have that coming to you at your executive committee in a few weeks, I think. And I hope that you'll give it consideration. 100 years, I think they beat them all in terms of their depth in the system, if you will. And then and that brings us to today. Thank you.
Thank you. So Director Bloomer, do you have any
Short and
meetings to
sweet,
report?
I did not attend any meetings on behalf of the agency, so
All right.
that's it.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Yes, on July 5th, I attended a Desert Hot Springs City Council meeting, and I announced to them that we had reduced our tax assessment, and to generally welcome that idea. I skipped Mission Springs study on the 13th, but I attended their board meeting on the 17th yesterday. It was Arden Wallam's final board meeting, so we're tribute to him. It was, I know we all wish him well in his retirement. I don't have anything else to report on that meeting. Let me just see. Everything went to sleep while you were talking. That's it for me. I'll say I spent July 7th down in Calipatria on a non-compensable visit. I spent the day with a German television crew who are looking into the alfalfa situation. And even though I knew that a lot of alfalfa is getting grown down there, I was really surprised by the scale of the operation of a particular company called Fondamonte. And I'll talk about that some other time, but it's an issue for me that this amount of water at virtually no cost goes to these farmers who grow a product that's ultimately exported. In this case, it all goes to Saudi Arabia. So it's a curiosity that we let that happen. I'll talk about it some other time. Thanks.
Thank you. So I attended from July 10th to the 13th the conference in Santa Fe for the Groundwater Management Districts Association. I'm not sure how long this agency has been a member of that organization, but my understanding since being on the board is it's been primarily a previous director of this board who attended and participated. There seemed to be, I think I was actually the only representative from California at that meeting, which I found a little bit particular. But it's most of the focus on the agenda, it turned out, was, I would say, New Mexico focused, perhaps because we were in New Mexico and at the state capitol. We weren't participating in the state capitol, but we were in the city that hosts the state capitol of New Mexico. So there was a lot about water in New Mexico, a lot about the 2 times that the state of Texas has sued New Mexico and the results of those compacts that have come out of that. I've actually learned how the water from the Colorado River gets to New Mexico, which I did not know, and that was kind of fascinating, a 32-mile tunnel that goes under the Continental Divide and ultimately mixes with the Rio Grande. We did get to visit a water treatment facility for the city and county of Santa Fe. Of course, they deal with surface water. Even though this was a groundwater conference, the plant that we visited actually was a surface that was taking water from the river. So there was a very elaborate process that I had absolutely no clue about until how that worked, because that's not what we do. They do also tap into groundwater, but more as a backup for the city and county of Santa Fe, because at one time they were almost entirely reliant on groundwater and then realized that they had to do something different and decided to take advantage of the water rights that the city and the county of Santa Fe actually had access to. I think the thing that was most relevant, if I can say that, with regard to something that might be of interest to this agency is there's a state project. There seems to be a big emphasis in the state of New Mexico, and it's probably true in a lot of states, perhaps and probably California too, on data collection. I think there's a realization that to make really good decisions about how to manage aquifers throughout the state of New Mexico, they need better data. And it's very sporadic. In some places it's really good, in some places it's not. And they also rely quite a bit on the petroleum industry in New Mexico, particularly in the, I guess that would be the southeastern corner of the state, where there is a lot of fracking. And so they use a lot of the data that they get from the oil and gas industry in that part of the state. But there's a big emphasis on data collection and sort of a data program for the entire state, which is managed by what's called the Office of the State Engineer, which I thought was an odd title for basically the organization within New Mexico, the state government agency that's responsible for water is called the Office of State Engineer. And then another project that I thought was maybe had more relevance was the 3D mapping of all the aquifers that's happening currently. That's a huge project for the state office of the Office of the State Engineer, and there are a lot of elements that perhaps were a little bit above my pay grade in terms of totally understanding, but the concept, of course, is something that I found rather intriguing. I'm not sure, again, what kind of opportunities we might be able to do something like that here. But again, that's about understanding really how much water there is and where it is and what kind of water it is, because so a lot of their aquifers are sort of divided into several layers, if you will. Where you might have that first 500 or 600 feet, which is the water that everybody wants, and then nobody really kind of wants the water that's below that, and they seem to fight over that a lot. But yeah, it was an interesting conference. Not a very large organization. I think there were maybe 70 attendees in total. Most of them seem to be from the Midwest, Midwestern states, and southern, sort of southwestern states. But they are looking to expand their footprint in terms of organizations, and I think I was asked probably 10 times by 10 different people, when are we going to host a meeting in California? Apparently that was something that former Director Shafi had sort of talked about with them before, and then COVID happened, so it didn't happen. But they definitely have us on their radar for doing something. This is their big summer conference. They also do a winter conference, and I suggested maybe winter was probably a better time to look at that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. Let's see, we can now move on to item number 9, which is director's comments or requests, and I'll start with Director Grasha.
No comments, no requests, thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No comments or requests.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
None for me, thanks.
Okay, and I have nothing else. So with that, we can put the meeting on hiatus for the moment and go into closed session. I think I have 8:45, so if we could meet in closed session at 8:55, and then we can continue our meeting there. Thank you very much. Today is reconvening into open session, and we can report that we had no actionable items in closed session. And with that, we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you.